Before you get a prosthetic leg, you need to choose the person who'll make that leg. You wouldn't pick a spouse without shopping around, so to speak. Your relationship with your prosthetist is also a long-term relationship, and breakups are complicated. So here are some points to consider to help you make a good match. We're not just talking obvious things like whether or not you get along. There's some serious issues to be aware of.
How are you today?
A little limp. Billing for prosthetic appointments is very different than billing for doctor's appointments, which makes it trickier to switch providers. My leg was billed as durable medical equipment. My prosthetist said that instead of getting paid per hour or per appointment, he gets paid per piece of equipment, meaning things like the socket, the foot, ankle, or knee if you're an above-knee amputee. Once I have my leg, if I switch to a different clinic and ask them to adjust something, I'm essentially asking them to work for free. The cost of appointments is worked into the price of the leg, which I already have. The new provider won't get a piece of the pie because it's already been eaten. He'll have to wait for the next one to bake. Months or years might pass before you need a new leg. That's a long time without without payment. Not all clinics are going to be willing to work for free that long. Until something needs to be replaced, such as the socket or foot, you might get stuck with a provider you don't love. So choose carefully, because breaking up is hard to do. Now, obviously some people do move to a new city and have no choice but to switch, but it's definitely preferable to make a choice you'll be happy with right from the get-go, because switching horses midstream is awkward. There's another reason why you want to meet multiple prosthetists ahead of amputation if possible. They know which surgeons are good. When I was younger, I subconsciously assumed that all surgeons were created equal, which seems really naive now that I've lost a leg due to a surgery gone wrong. The burnt hand teaches best, or the lost leg. So now I'm in the habit of getting multiple opinions and comparing notes. When I decided to amputate my leg, I had multiple doctors on my team who could have performed the surgery. Even among surgeons who have performed amputations, for many it's something they've only done a handful of times. Oh, that's a terrible pun. Oops. Anyhow, when meeting prospective prosthetists, I asked who was actually good at amputation. You see, prosthetists have to deal with the outcome for the rest of an amputee's life. They also spend a lot more time interacting with a lot more amputees than most doctors or even physical therapists do. I think that makes them some of the best judges of who's actually good at amputating. It's a weird talent. At my request, my prosthetist gave me a detailed critique. Some surgeons leave more of the calf muscle, thinking more padding is better, but then the extra squishiness makes it harder to get a stable fit in a prosthetic socket. Other doctors aren't as good at minimizing the dog ears at either end of the incision. Some doctors are especially good at dealing with nerves. Others are very particular in how they bevel the bone, going so far as to lift off the bone's membrane before rounding off the edges and replacing the membrane to help prevent future bone spurs.
We've saved the patient.
Some surgeons have a lot of experience in TMR, others don't.
I'm just completing the horizontal mattress stitch.
There are a host of subtleties that had never occurred to me. I just don't chop off legs that often. Interviewing multiple prosthetists not only demonstrated their respective expertise, but also helped me make a more informed choice about who would be best to perform the amputation. That's what I call killing two birds with one stone. Make that 3 birds. I have a theory that if a prosthetist isn't willing to take time with you when you're a prospective customer, then he's unlikely to take a lot of time with you once he has your business. The difficulty in switching clinics doesn't exactly provide him with motivation to keep wooing patients once they've been won. One prosthetist I met spent a few hours getting to know and educate me. Another took only a few minutes. I went with the first prosthetist, and to this day he takes his time with me. And it isn't empty time. Aside from fine-tuning my prosthesis, he uses the opportunity to educate me. Not all prosthetists do that. It's the difference between a parent telling a kid to do something because I said so, versus teaching them so they understand why something is important. Becoming an amputee isn't like getting your appendix out. For many surgeries, you don't truly need to understand all the nuts and bolts of the situation. Surgery isn't much of a partnership. You just lie there unconscious while the surgeon does his thing. After a few weeks of healing, you go your separate ways. By contrast, your prosthetic leg is something you'll interact with every day for the rest of your life. It's important to know how to properly use it and take care of it and troubleshoot common issues. That makes this more of a partnership. My prosthetist makes the leg, but I'm the one taking care of it on a daily basis. If your prosthetist values your input, educates you, and has a communication style that jives well with yours, then I'd say you're off to a great start. But back to the subject of time, how much time and effort will your prosthetist give you post-amputation before you even get to making the leg? The person I eventually chose met with me before amputation, then came to the hospital a couple days post-op to fit me with a rigid removable dressing, which protects the leg while also keeping the knee straight so the muscles don't shorten and contract, which could be painful and problematic when learning to walk. Then a few weeks after amputation, he drove to my house, checked on me, gave me a compression sock called a shrinker, and reviewed the timeline and process for getting a prosthesis. A different person I met with said that he'd see me when it was time to make the leg. I asked whether he would put anything on my leg in the meantime to prevent contractures. He said,
"No."
His lack of concern about preventing problems was a definite turnoff. The irony is that this provider was only 1 or 2 minutes away from the hospital and maybe 10 or 15 minutes away from my home. Yet he wasn't going to check on me, whereas the first prosthetist was located out of town but was still willing to come visit me while I was recovering. We haven't even gotten to the point of making a prosthetic leg, and can you already see the difference in the level of care? Even if your leg was lost unexpectedly, such as in an accident, so you don't have time to plan ahead, you can still look for indicators such as how your prosthetist behaves if or when he comes to the hospital. Does he take the time to talk to you? Does he treat you like a person and answer your questions? Or does he just treat you like a job that needs to get done? If anything makes you uncomfortable, there's still time to meet other providers before making your first prosthesis. When it's finally time to make your prosthesis, will your prosthetist customize or take more of a cookie cutter approach? Think of this as a spectrum where it's usually best to avoid the extremes. There's a clinic an hour or two away from me where patients have minimal say in what type of foot or socket they get. They don't even get to choose the color. They're all the same. When a provider prioritizes efficiency, it might help them get through a lot of patients and a lot of limbs, but it isn't necessarily great for the individual patients. Some people are okay with that because they value someone who's highly experienced in making basic legs, or because they don't do a lot of walking and their needs are met by what's being offered. If someone only works with a couple options, then they probably know those options inside and out. But if you're more athletic or have an extra complicated situation, the lack of options and broader experience could be extremely frustrating. The cookie cutter approach works only if you happen to like the particular cookie being served. My prosthetist said that if I wanted something super customized, I could even pick out fabric I liked and he'd put it on the socket for me. He also said he has glitter. I like glitter. Customization is generally good because we're all individuals with unique situations, but it can also be taken to an extreme. Not everyone wants to be a guinea pig. Have you heard the saying about how you can be an expert in a couple things or mediocre in a lot of things? It's the difference between going broad and going deep. If a provider has worked with a certain type of leg only once or twice, that's very different from someone who specializes in that option. While options are great, without the experience to back them up, those options aren't quite as useful. Sometimes they aren't even relevant. I mean, I can't afford a computerized prosthetic leg, so going to someone who specializes in that wouldn't be a good fit for me. In my opinion, the sweet spot is when you find a prosthetist who's well versed in enough options that you have a variety of choices, but not so many options that he only has minimal experience in each option. Speaking of my opinion, that's what this video is all about. My opinions and experiences, not medical advice. That said, I do fact check statements with my prosthetist before filming just to be sure that what I say is on point. He's a wealth of knowledge, so special thanks to him for the time he's taken to review scripts and answer my questions. Let's cover some considerations that aren't deciding factors for me personally. I didn't pick my prosthetist based on the location, the fanciness of the facility, or even my doctor's recommendation. Here's a story to illustrate my point. I've had a lot of surgeries and a lot of doctors.
Things are gonna get intense.
And each of those doctors seems to have a favorite physical therapist. At first that was helpful, but it turned into a problem when half a dozen doctors wanted me to go to half a dozen different physical therapists. I didn't have enough time or money to go to everyone, which meant I had to pick one. So I started asking why the different doctors favored the various therapists. I found out that different physical therapists have slightly different specialties, plus there are often non-medical reasons in the mix, such as whether the doctor personally knows the therapist, whether they're in the same building, facility affiliations, ease of communication, and overall comfort and convenience for the doctor. The more questions I asked, the more I realized that your average doctor simply doesn't know everyone in the industry. And once he's latched onto his favorite providers, he probably isn't going to be continually updating his opinion by evaluating every single new physical therapist that rolls into town. The same concept applies when a doctor recommends a prosthetist. Unless you ask questions, you won't know why the doctor is recommending a particular clinic. You and your doctor may be on the same page, or you may be prioritizing different values. Let me be clear, I'm not telling you to ignore your doctor, far from it. I'm just reminding you that ultimately this is your decision. To increase your odds of satisfaction, it helps to do your own research. Meet with multiple prostheticians, look at online reviews, and if possible, talk to other amputees in your area. Ask multiple doctors not just who they like, but why they like them.
I'm your doctor.
Thank you, doctor. I have one doctor who always asks me questions about my physical therapist, prosthetists, and other providers. So not only is he checking on me, but he's also keeping his finger on the pulse, so to speak. By doing this with his patients, he's constantly gained feedback and continually reevaluating his opinions. So when he makes a recommendation, I tend to place extra value on it. Long story short, your doctor's opinion does matter, but so does your own gut feeling. If you meet the prosthetist your doctor recommends and you just don't feel comfortable with them, it's okay to meet other people or to talk with your doctor about your concerns. Ultimately, it's up to me to make sure I go to a provider who meets my needs. Even though I ultimately chose the prosthetist my doctor had recommended, I didn't do it on autopilot. I did my own research to make sure I really had the best option for me personally. My prosthetist is a little farther away than some options, but he's been fabulous. Obviously, there are practical limitations on how far away your prosthetist can be, but mine is well worth a couple extra hours of drive time. His clinic isn't like some of the fancier clinics I've seen online, but it has what I need. His focus isn't on maintaining a state-of-the-art facility, but on helping me live my best life. Coincidentally, that's my priority too. Very importantly, when you interview prosthetists, you want to ask what to do if you have a prosthetic emergency, like your leg won't come off or something breaks. Is there an after-hours number? Will he come to you, or do you need to find a way to get to him? Can he help you right away, or will you have to wait until business hours and call and schedule an appointment? Here again, the answer to these questions can be an indication of how much the provider cares about his patients. Whilst we're at it, let's not overlook obvious considerations, such as which prosthetists are in-network for your insurance. Also keep in mind, prosthetic fittings are an up-close and personal process, especially for above-knee amputees. So you want someone you feel comfortable with and who'll listen to you. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments. Becoming an amputee can be a very lonely journey, which is why I'm grateful to have someone on my side who's supportive, knowledgeable, and always willing to help me out. Plus, he tolerates my puns.
Yeah, sure. That's very nice.
Oh, thank you. I hope you find someone just as amazing. And whatever you're going through, hang in there. I'm Stephanina, and thank you for joining me on my amputee adventures. If you want to hear more about prosthetics, like how long it takes to get your first one and what those first steps are like, I've got a playlist. I'll see you in the next video.